started on radio clarinet, you know.
In school?
In school, yeah. And because when y'all started playing, they didn't have no bass guitar in school.
Oh, that's right. When we all started playing, bass guitar came later.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
So what were you playing? Upright?
Upright, like the one there that I had that for a minute, but I need a year, man.
Yeah, just to put in the time,
I
right?
need a year.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yep.
Oh, with Kelly, huh?
Went to Kelly, that's right.
Wow.
Test. Yeah, that was
In Paul Chambers, man. You know.
My mom told me that when I was maybe 4 years old, Wynton Kelly came and picked me up and disappeared.
Wow.
For brought me home at 2 a.m.
Wow.
I was 4 or 5. And,
Wow.
And she doesn't know where I was, what I did.
Right.
So I just decided to make up a story. So I decided I was hanging out with Paul Chambers.
Did you meet Paul then?
I don't know, I was 4 years old, so I don't remember it all, you know what I mean? But I decided.
Yeah. He was great, I heard.
Yes, he was, man.
Yeah.
So how are you doing? You got us?
You got us? Okay, testing.
We good?
Testing.
Okay. Welcome to Miller Time. My name is Marcus Miller, and today is such an incredible honor. I'm sitting here with really, we use this word, often, but lots of times it doesn't apply. But in this case, it actually applies. We're sitting here with a legend, a musical legend, Verdine White, bassist, vocalist with Earth, Wind & Fire. How you doing, man?
I'm doing good, thank you, man. Thank you for coming here today. Thank you.
Oh, man, we're at his house, and we're sitting in his, what would you call this room, Verdine?
I just called it my trophy room, my own personal trophy room where I keep everything.
I was just joking because I said, man, you don't need any wallpaper because it's just all gold records. I'm just sitting here. Hold on, man. Let me just call out some of these, man. Gratitude, Spirit, I Am. What else? What else is up here? That's the Way of the World.
Right.
Oh my goodness.
Right.
I mean, it's just all. And then Level 42.
Right, Level 42.
Did you produce this?
I produced that.
Man,
Mark King,
Yes, Mark King. Yeah, so he has gold records lining the room, and I'm not even going to mention all the other awards. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Grammy awards in the case, in the bookshelf, just all sorts of stuff, man. So you were telling me that you make sure that you don't throw any of these mementos away.
Yeah, because you know what happens. You have a lot of fans that love the music,
Right.
and you find out that they're collectors. So I had to kind of switch my head, and I had to sort of become a collector.
Yes.
Because a lot of the fans, they collect things, and you forget that you even get things. How you move so fast.
Right.
And then you get an award,
Yeah.
and then the office takes it, because you take a picture so fast, and you never see it again. It's in a storage somewhere.
So you have it all here, man. This
Yeah,
is
as much as I
incredible.
can.
Not to mention the instruments, man. You got a bunch of basses. So anyway.
Yeah, I don't play them too much anymore, but I play that Fender.
Okay, yeah, that looks like the one that you would play.
Yeah, I play, but everything else I don't play them too much.
Can you tell me? I just want to go back, and if you could just tell me, like the origins. Okay, I know that Maurice was playing the drums with Ramsey Lewis.
Right.
Maurice White, the leader of the group, and your brother.
Right.
Who just it's so incredible. Just let me rewind for a second. I just want to tell you how this interview came to be. You guys are going to receive from the Grammys Lifetime Achievement Award, Earth, Wind & Fire. And so they had a reception, a lunch reception for the people who were Grammy nominees.
Right.
And so we saw each other there, and we're sitting at a table, you, Ralph, and myself.
Right.
And you and I just started talking, man.
Right.
Started talking about music and the group Earth, Wind & Fire. And, it was such an interesting conversation that I said, I'd love to interview you, formally. And we said, yeah, and we set a date.
Right.
And then 2 days later, man, or was it a day later? Okay, Maurice passed.
He passed, that's right.
And
we were
incredible.
talking about him.
Yes, of course, we were talking about Maurice, who was the leader of the group, who had the vision of the group. And I called you that day, of course, to convey my condolences, but I also said, look, man, we don't have to do this interview. I know you got a lot going on now, man. It must be a tough situation, a tough time for you. He said, no, Maurice would have wanted us to do this and continue. And it's funny how musicians, we usually feel that, people are going to assume, something, difficult happens in our lives and that we're not going to play.
Right.
But it's not really the case, is it?
No, because with a cat like Reese, he would want us to talk.
Yes.
Because after we had the lunch, I called Reese that night. I said, "Oh man," he said, "How did lunch go?" I said, "It went great, man." I said, "I was sitting with Marcus. You know, man, he was just, how's Marcus doing?" and I said, "Man, we're gonna get together next week." And we were talking about you, and you know, we were talking about coming out here and how did we hold it together. That's how we were talking. You know, I said, "Well, I had an older brother, Maurice."
Right.
You know what I mean? And I said, he was a stickler for perfection.
Yes.
And don't forget, now we were the first African American group to do what we did.
Right. Groundbreaking.
So we didn't really have a lot of room for personal flaws.
Right.
To last a long time.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, getting into drugs and all that kind of stuff.
That's what I asked you. I said, man, how did you keep it together? Particularly, you guys hit the scene late 60s, like 69, 70, or was it later?
Right. But the band started, Reese had left Ramsey in 1970 in April.
Okay.
And I came out June 6, 1970.
Okay, there you go. So we're talking heyday of drugs and partying.
Right.
And you guys just somehow, I don't know how you did it, you guys made it right through that period without getting derailed like so many other artists did.
Right.
And you were saying, hey man, first of all, Maurice was a very strong leader.
Right.
And he kind of set the path for you guys.
Right. And then what happened was, don't forget now, Earth, Wind and Fire was Maurice's dream.
Yes.
That he carved out, as I say, from the clay of his soul.
Ooh, yes.
You did. And so what I didn't want to do is, I didn't want to mess up his dream. You know what I'm saying? Because don't forget now, when I came out here, like I said, I was 18, I weighed 100 pounds, I was buck teeth, had pimples, and I had $30 in my pocket.
Wow, man.
And so, yeah, man, and then he said, if you get on drugs, I'm sending you home.
What's the age difference between you and
10.
Reese? 10 years.
10
Okay, so
years.
he was very much a big brother.
Right, and then he had, all those years with Ramsey.
Yes.
And then he had played, sessions, for Chess Records.
For Chess Records.
All those big records, Rescue Me, Fontella Bass.
Is that Reese on drums on Rescue Me?
Yeah, that's Reese. Wow. Right, and that's Reese, Summertime Billy Stewart?
Yes.
That's Reese too.
Wow.
My Guy.
Yes.
So he had a lot of studio experience.
Sure.
So by the time, so when he came out here, he was really ready.
He was ready.
Yeah, and I was in Chicago, doing my little thing in Chicago. And then I had a 4-year paid scholarship to the American Conservatory of Music, which was a big deal.
Yeah, sure.
So he calls, everything's paid for, I'm going to school, man, I'm classical, I'm going to do the thing, be in orchestra one day, maybe one day I'd make a record.
Sure.
He said, man, I want you to come to California. and I said, what about all my schooling?
Right.
He said, I'll teach you everything you need to know out here.
Wow.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, the show is Miller Time. My name is Marcus Miller. I'm sitting here with Verdine White, and we're really just starting to get into it. So you're 10 years younger, you're 18 years old, and Maurice is already in LA, just left Ramsey Lewis, decided he's going to put this group together, and he called you out, right? Said, come on out here. But he gave you some instructions, right?
Right, exactly, man, because, it was like that I couldn't get on drugs.
Right.
And if you get on drugs, I'm sending you home.
Wow.
And even recently, the last time I was at his crib, I said, man, you still gonna send me home? so he was laughing, man. And then what happened was that, it was like you said, it was like at the heyday of the first era of sex, drugs, and rock and roll.
Yes.
Free love, psychedelics.
Yeah.
And California was #1
Yeah.
for all of that.
That was ground zero.
Ground zero, because we had just left Woodstock.
Yes.
It was 2 years from the Civil Rights Movement, so the country was on fire.
Yeah.
It was similar to like, what Black Lives Matter now.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Got it.
You know what I mean? And and we had 4 movements at the same time: the Vietnam movement, Black Panther movement. You had the Woodstock movement.
Yes.
The Women's Live movement.
Right.
So you had 4 movements at one time.
Tell me, what was your impression of your older brother at the time? I mean, were you in awe? Were you, were you respectful? What was your relationship like?
In awe. And respectful. And I was glad to be one of the cats. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
I wasn't one of the cats yet, but I was around the cats.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And don't forget I'm 18, so I didn't have, I had no swagger. Wasn't nothing happening yet.
Right,
I was like feeling my way through, and then and in California, that's when you can meet everybody at the time. We would go to Jack Nicholson's house, and and Jim Brown was our first manager.
D. Jim Brown.
D. Jim Brown.
He was your first manager.
Right, and he was just coming off the Dirty Dozen.
Yeah.
He's a movie star.
Right. So your eyes as big as half
Oh
dollars.
yeah, man, and then we were going up to the Whiskey Go Go.
Yeah.
We were going to the Troubadour.
Yes.
But at the same time, we were working on songs. I hadn't started working on songs yet. I was just playing on them.
Okay.
And then I was playing on them in the studio with him.
Yeah.
So those first couple of records that I was kind of feeling my way through.
Sure.
Cause see, I had never played with Reese.
Right. He's
Coming
your
up.
big brother. He
Right.
was 10 years older than you.
Yes, I had played with Freddie.
Yes. Okay.
But I hadn't played with Reese.
Right. Okay.
And what happened was, man.
And Freddie is your other brother. Freddie is the drummer.
Exactly.
Okay.
And so the first record I played with him was on Sweet Sweetback.
Which was the soundtrack.
That's right, Melvin and Peoples.
Right.
And so, I'm hanging out with Reeves, talking, you know what I mean? We're going to dinner and doing that, and we used to eat in the Muslim restaurant, and all that stuff, man.
Yeah.
And so we go to the studio.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when it hit me, man. And we did it on the soundstage.
Really?
And man, I'm like, oh man.
So for those of you who don't know, Sweetback's Badass Song
Right,
was
right.
the full name of the movie.
Right,
And it was really the first blaxploitation movie, right?
Right.
Melvin Van Peebles was the director, right?
Right.
And this was groundbreaking because there wasn't a movie like this that had existed
Right.
before. And Maurice and Melvin were buddies.
That's right, they were buddies.
Okay.
Right. Good friends, and Melvin had just moved from France.
Oh, he spent some time in Europe.
That's right.
Just studying filmmaking.
And doing independent films and
Okay.
French films, yeah.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So man, you guys, next thing you know, man, you're fresh from Chicago. Next thing you know, you're in the band playing
Right.
bass, and there's a big movie screen in front of you.
Right.
And you guys are creating the soundtrack.
Exactly, and Mario Van Peebles, the
Mhm.
great director Mario,
Yes.
Melvin's son, he was in the movie.
He was in the. That's right.
Yeah,
That's
he was
right.
in the movie, I think. Yeah. And what happened was, man, we started warming up.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, warming up like the way cats warm up.
Yeah. Just jamming, just playing something.
And man, I was getting scared because I was on the soundstage. That's when it hit me.
Yeah.
Because I had never been in the studio with him.
Yeah.
I was with Freddie.
Wow.
But not with him, the pros, right?
Right, right.
And man, he's up playing.
Yeah.
I'm looking at him. And excuse my language. He said,
Right.
man, don't look at me.
Right.
Look at the fucking screen.
Now, just for people to know, these days when you score a movie, you have the film on your computer.
Right.
And the film has no music, and then you, with that same computer,
Right.
you'll add the music to
Right.
the film. But
And a
that-
time code.
And time code,
Right.
right, to make sure that the music stays in sync with the
Right.
images.
And you can stop and go back to the time code.
Let's try it
Then
again. Mhm.
you had to shoot. There was no sound. It was you were making it up, scene by scene,
So you're playing as they're playing the movie.
as they play in the
on
movie.
big screen.
So you're watching.
Wow.
So it was a really deep experience, man. Because I had never done that, and I had never been on the soundstage of Paramount Pictures.
Yes.
And I didn't have a car then. So I walked on the lot,
Right.
and I got to, you got to sign, you got to check in. They looking at me.
Yeah, did they let you in? Because they got heavy security.
Right. See, now it's not. It's different now. When I drive up now, oh, Mr. White, right here.
Yeah,
Parking
right.
space over here.
Right,
I go on
right.
the soundstage, right?
Right.
But it was different. And I'm watching extras in Cleopatra outfits, man.
Yeah, man.
And I knew it was real.
Wow.
And it was a deep record. It was my first record with him.
Yes.
It wasn't, it did good. I don't know how. Reese to this day Reese for a long time didn't tell me how I did.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, because it's your first one, so you want to know, hey, Reese, did I do okay?
Yeah. I asked him later, maybe like 10, 15 years later. And I said, Reese, I was always wanting to ask you, this after That's the Way the World was.
Yeah.
Hey man, you never told me, because later on we said, man, you did good.
Right.
You never told me, man, about this Sweet Sweetback record, man.
Yeah.
It's after all the records, Sean started.
Sure.
Hey man, you never told me how I did on that record. He said, well, that's funny you should ask that, man.
Wow.
You know what, I was thinking of sending your ass back to Chicago.
Really?
I said, you was?
Really?
You was? Man, we laughed later.
Wow.
You talking about we laughed so damn hard, man.
What do you think it was that gave him doubts?
Well, don't forget now he had played with Louis Satterfield.
He had played with the best. Yeah.
The best.
Yeah.
Cleveland Eden.
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't there yet.
Right.
You know what I'm talking about? I didn't have concept.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying?
Right. You could play, but the great plays, they have a concept.
Yeah, what he was talking about and where he wanted to go and where the music wanted to go.
Yeah.
And it was on the Need of Love record
Mm-hmm.
that where I got it together.
Wow.
Where the first Earth, Wind & Fire record on Warner's was good.
Mm-hmm.
It was good. It was technically good.
Yes.
It was getting better.
Right.
but it was The Need of Love where I got it together.
Is that the second Warner record?
The second Warner record.
So you guys had 2 records
Right.
after Sweetback, which
Right.
was a soundtrack, which
That's
was
right.
on another label, right?
Right.
But then you had 2 records on Warner Brothers before you began your long stint
Right.
with Columbia.
That's
So
right.
The one you're talking about is the second Warner record.
The second Warner record, The Need of Love record, where I Think About Loving You on it, and,
Yeah.
and another tune called Energy,
Sure.
which Reese did a great drum solo at the top.
Oh wow, I have to go back and listen to that.
Yeah.
So how did you get together so fast? Because usually it takes years and years for someone to find a concept on their instrument. Find an identity.
Well, we were rehearsing all the time.
Hmm.
And I think one of the things that was good, I spent a lot of time with Maurice.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And he was so consistent. We would sit down and have listening sessions. We would sit in the living room, and he played Coltrane records and let me listen to a variety of different records.
Yeah.
We played, the first Sly Stone record.
Yeah.
Yeah. Into the New World.
Sure. Yeah.
We were going to clubs, see people play.
Wow.
We went to see Donny Hathaway play live because
Yeah.
my brother Freddie was on drums on that one.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's right.
With Donny, because everybody's from Chicago.
Yes.
So I was able to really pick up fact because I was with him all the
You
time.
got deep education. Didn't you?
Yeah, and we would listen to songs, and then we would just start playing them down. Even if he just played on the hi-hat.
Yeah.
And so it was gonna be like this here, this here, this here.
Yeah.
And I would just play it along. So before you know it, it was a natural
Yes.
progression that I made a big leap.
This is Miller Time. My special guest, my very incredibly special guest, is Verdine White, bassist with Earth, Wind, and Fire, and we're talking about the origins of the group. Can you tell me, Verdine, about the relationship between jazz and the other styles of music? Because a lot of the guys in the group actually began as jazz musicians.
Right.
And then there was this metamorphosis into, I don't want to even try to label what you guys became, but it mixed all sorts of styles. There was of course jazz, but there was R&B and soul and funk and Brazilian music and rock music. You guys were one of the first groups, along with Sly, to start to combine elements. What was the relationship with jazz initially with the musicians in the band?
Well, don't forget now, jazz is actually African Americans' classical music,
Right.
we always would say. And Reese had a strong jazz background, being with Ramsey,
Yeah.
playing jazz clubs in Chicago.
How long did he play drums with Ramsey Lewis? Do you have
5 years.
5 years.
Yeah. 1965 and till 1970. And
That's a good run.
that's a good run.
Yeah.
And what happened was that and then Reese played jazz clubs in Chicago before Ramsey.
Right.
But I think as he traveled the country with Ramsey, Maurice saw the change where the country was going. See, there was a change going on, with music. Sly Stone had hit the scene.
Right.
Reese saw the same change that Miles saw.
Yes. Miles made a switch at that same time, didn't he?
Around the same time, because we had albums like Miles in the Sky,
Yes.
Bitches Brew,
Yeah.
Hendrix was hitting the scene.
Yes.
And Ramsey and them would play in tuxedos. But when Reese came off the stage, he had a goatee.
Yeah,
And,
right.
but he was the hip cat of that trio.
Got it.
He was in the health. He was getting the health food.
Right.
Meditation,
Yes.
yoga, incense.
Yes.
A natural.
Yes.
They weren't doing that yet.
Right.
And then Reese was listening to Herbie, Maiden Voyage, and he started making Ramsey expand that consciousness. You know what I'm saying?
So Reese was very in tune
Right.
with what was going on in that era.
That's right. And he saw the young people changing, and so he figured out he wanted to put a group that would be like that. You know what I mean? That could fulfill that type of thing.
But how do you do that? I mean, recognizing that you'd like to do it is one thing.
Right.
But actually having the ability to start off as a jazz musician and then all of a sudden, because some of those grooves that you all put on those records, some of those grooves that Reese played on the drums
Right.
were funky.
Right.
I mean, it was another language almost.
Right. Well, don't forget now he's funky. He coming out of Memphis too. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And then Reese was like, he was bold. So he didn't really, he knew he had something.
Yes.
You know what I mean? He had that energy, coming off of Ramsey. And Reese had been very successful in Chicago.
Right.
So he figured he could be successful in California. But not sort of like successful without any depth.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Things like that.
Yeah, no, he didn't want to be a superficial success.
Right.
He had things that he wanted to express.
Exactly. And then don't forget now, Reese had been reading cats like Eldridge Cleaver,
Yeah.
Soul on Ice,
Soul on Ice, yeah.
Malcolm X,
Yes.
Autobiography from Malcolm X.
Yeah.
So his consciousness was deeper. You know what I'm saying? So, you know, and part of that was like, you know, taking care of yourself.
Yeah.
You know, meditating.
Yeah.
You know, which was a different, now it's part of our society.
Right.
Then it was like a little different.
Yeah, people are like, what is this guy
You know,
doing?
this guy's out lighting incense and stuff, man. And you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so he really, he tapped in and was part of that generation. That wasn't really Ramsey's thing.
Got it. So, okay, so the first two Warner Brothers records, then you moved to Columbia, right?
Right.
And began a long, very successful run. But tell me about the first Columbia days. Was it Clive Davis?
Clive Davis.
Who brought you to Columbia?
Yeah, we were doing a show with John Sebastian, and we had just met our new managers, Bob Cavallo and Joe Ruffalo, and Bob, great manager, great manager, went on to manage Prince.
Yes, I remember those names.
Seal, he ended up running Hollywood Records. Bob, great manager. So he had Little Feat.
Yes.
So he had John Sebastian, and John was leaving the Loving Spoonful.
Yes.
To go on his own, you know. For those who like, would you believe in magic?
Right.
You know, John, good guy too, man. And I knew his brother Mark Sebastian too.
Okay.
And he lived in Laurel Canyon.
All right.
And Laurel Canyon was hippie capital.
That was like Main Street for the hip.
Well, yeah, because up there, man, that was like, you know, Crosby, Stills and Nash, Joni Mitchell,
Right.
Neil Young, David Crosby. That was hippie central.
So Laurel Canyon, for those of you who don't live in LA or aren't familiar with LA, it's a street that goes over that hill. You know
Right.
the hill with the Hollywood sign on it? Laurel Canyon goes across that hill. So it starts in Hollywood.
That's right.
West Hollywood, and it goes up and over the hill into the valley.
Right.
So just so you know. But there are homes all along
That's right.
this Laurel Canyon street. And this was the hippie central.
Yeah, man, you driving your car, you smell the weed while you drive. While you were driving, right? And Laurel Canyon was the music. So what happened was, we would go to the Troubadour, Maurice and I, and we would go see the acts. And then John met Maurice, and they took us on tour with him.
Wow.
You know what I mean? And because we were an opening act.
Yeah.
For at least 5 years before we headlined. We didn't start out headlining.
Okay.
But we opened up for cats like John Sebastian, the Eagles, Rod Stewart, Uriah Heep.
So you guys were a black group, but you guys were opened up for like mainstream pop acts. Huh?
Right.
How did that happen?
Well, what happened was that when we signed with Columbia, and Clive came out after the John Sebastian gig.
Yeah.
And we auditioned for him at Sunset Sound.
Okay.
And then he bought the contract from Warner's.
Yeah.
I think for $90,000 at the time, which was a lot of money.
It's a lot of money
at that time for an African. And he was taking a big risk.
Right.
And then Clive took us to London at the Grosvenor House to debut us in front of everybody. And you had cats, you had Andy Williams was on that show, but the big group was supposed to be Azteca.
Okay, I remember Azteca.
You know what I mean? They were supposed to be the next Santana.
They were up from the Bay Area.
That's right. And then we
Yeah.
killed it.
Right.
I mean, killed it.